The moment Amara saw Tun's reflection in the store window, weaving through the Saturday crowd with that predatory stride, she knew she had seconds before he spotted her. He was supposed to be deported back to Lagos, supposed to be blocked on every platform, but there he was, and when his eyes locked onto the back of her head, his voice boomed across the mall like a claim of ownership.
Get back here!
Let go of me!
You're not going anywhere!
She bolted toward the restrooms, heart hammering, and did the only thing her terror-soaked brain could conjure. She grabbed a tall stranger in a charcoal coat by the lapels and dragged him into the women's bathroom,
Please, he's
gasping,
going to kill
"Please,
me. Help me.
he's going to
What?
kill
Who?
me outside the
He's
stall they'd
coming.
locked
Please help
themselves
me.
in."
Okay, stay with
Tun's
me.
boots began tapping the tile, moving closer with each kicked open door. What happened next will blow your mind, but first, hit that subscribe button because you won't believe how this stranger took him down. Seat tight, dearies, as we dive into the story proper. The heavy glass door of the mall hadn't even fully closed behind Amara when she felt the hair on her neck stand up. It was a primal instinct, the kind honed by months of looking over her shoulder. She didn't turn around immediately. Instead, she caught her reflection in a store window, pretending to admire a mannequin's silk scarf. In the blurred movement of the crowded corridor behind her, she saw it, the specific, aggressive stride of a man who didn't belong in this space. Tunned. Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through her chest. He was supposed to be back in Lagos. He was supposed to be blocked on every platform. Yet there he was, weaving through the Saturday shoppers with a predatory focus that made the bright mall lights feel suddenly like interrogator lamps. Amara's breath hitched. She couldn't let him see her. If he caught her here, in this public space, he'd make a scene that would end in blood or handcuffs, usually hers. She spun on her heel and bolted, her boots clicking frantically against the marble. She didn't look back, but she could hear the sudden increase in his pace. He'd spotted the back of her head. Amara, his voice boomed, echoing off the high ceilings. It wasn't a call of affection, it was a bark of ownership. She rounded a corner near the food court, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Ahead, the signs for the restrooms glowed. It was a dead end, but it was the only door close enough. As she reached the threshold, she saw a tall man in a charcoal overcoat exiting the men's room, looking at his watch. In a moment of pure, unadulterated desperation, Amara didn't just run past him. She lunged. She grabbed the stranger by the lapels of his coat, her fingers digging into the expensive fabric, and hauled him backward with a strength fueled by terror. "Hey, what are you?" the man started, his voice deep and startled. "Please," she gasped, her eyes wide and swimming with tears as she shoved him through the door marked with a silhouette of a dress. "Please, he's going to kill me. Just stay quiet." Yeeman didn't have time to process why he was being dragged into a women's restroom by a trembling woman he'd never seen before. He stumbled back as she kicked a stall door open, pulled him inside, and slammed the latch shut just as the main restroom door swung open with a violent thud. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Amara's ragged, shallow breathing. Yeeman stood mere inches from her in the cramped stall. He was tall, his head nearly reaching the top of the partition, and his sharp, Korean features were set in an expression of intense confusion that slowly shifted into alertness. He looked down at Amara, seeing the way her hands shook as she pressed them against her mouth to stifle a sob. Outside the stall, heavy boots paced the tile. Tap, tap, tap. "I know you're in here, Amara." Tun's voice was low, vibrating with a terrifying calm. "I saw your shoes. I saw you run. Don't make this harder. You know I don't like it when you hide." Amara squeezed her eyes shut, a single tear sliding over her knuckles. Yeeman's eyes narrowed. He didn't look afraid, he looked like he was calculating. He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, not a romantic gesture, but a grounding one. It was firm and incredibly warm. "Is he armed?" Yeeman whispered, his voice so faint it was almost a vibration. Amara shook her head frantically, then paused. I don't know. He usually carries a pocket knife. He's obsessed. He followed me from Nigeria. Please don't let him take me." The sound of the stall door next to theirs being kicked open echoed like a gunshot. Bang. "Not in this one," Tund muttered. Bang. Another stall door. He was moving down the line. There were only 4 stalls. They were in the third. Yeeman's gaze shifted from the door to Amara. He saw the sheer trauma etched into her face, the hollowed-out look of someone who had been hunted for a long time. His posture changed. The confusion vanished, replaced by a cold, professional stillness.
Listen to me, Yemen breathed into her ear, his lips barely moving. When I step out, you stay behind me. Do not speak. Do not look at him. Do you understand? Amara nodded, though her knees felt like water. She realized then that this stranger wasn't reacting like a normal person. He wasn't panicked. He was waiting for an opening. Bang. The door to the second stall flew back. Amara, my love, Tun said, his voice closer now, dripping with a sickening blend of tenderness and rage. You're being very disrespectful. After everything I did to find you, after the money I spent on the private investigators, come out now and we can go home. Yimin reached for the latch. Amara grabbed his wrist, her eyes pleading. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, and then, with a fluid motion, he flicked the lock and stepped out of the stall. Tund was standing right there, his hand raised to strike the door of their stall. He froze, his dark eyes bulging as he looked at the tall, well-dressed man, stepping out from the place his ex-girlfriend should have been. Who the hell are you? Tund roared, his face contorting. Where is she, Amara? Yeeman didn't flinch. He didn't even move back. He stepped forward, closing the gap until he was uncomfortably close to Tund, forcing the shorter man to look up at him. You're making a lot of noise in a lady's room, Yeeman said, his tone conversational, almost bored. And you're upsetting my girlfriend. We were trying to have a private conversation about our dinner plans. Do you mind? Amara stepped out from behind Yeeman, her heart in her throat. She stayed behind his shoulder, just as he'd instructed. Seeing Tund in the flesh sent a jolt of nausea through her, but Yeeman's broad back felt like a fortress. Tund's eyes darted to Amara, then back to Yeeman. His face turned a deep, bruised purple. Girlfriend, you lying? Amara, who is this? Who is this man? He's the man who's going to ask you to leave once, Yeeman said softly. And then he's the man who's going to make you leave. Which one do you prefer? You don't know who I am. Tund screamed, reaching into his jacket pocket. Amara screamed, Tund, stop. But Yeeman was faster. Before Tund's hand could even clear his pocket, Yeeman's hand shot out. He didn't punch. He grabbed Tund's wrist in a localized grip that looked effortless but made Tund drop to his knees instantly, a sharp cry of pain escaping his lips. I don't care who you are, Yeeman said, his voice dropping an octave. I care that you're a predator, and right now, you're in a very vulnerable position. Let go of me, I'll kill you both. Tund thrashed, but Yeeman moved with the grace of a dancer, shifting his weight and pinning Tund's arm behind his back with a sickening pop. I wouldn't advise that, Yeeman remarked. He looked over his shoulder at Amara. Are you all right? I'm okay, she whispered, staring at the scene in disbelief. For months, Tund had been a monster in her nightmares, an unstoppable force. Yet here he was, pinned to a restroom floor by a man she had met 3 minutes ago. The restroom door swung open again, and this time it was two mall security guards, their radios chirping. They took in the scene: a man pinned to the floor, a terrified woman, and Yeeman holding the situation together with clinical precision. He's been stalking this woman, Yeeman told the guards, not letting go until they were close enough to take over. He followed her in here and was threatening her. I believe he has a weapon in his right jacket pocket. The guards moved in, handcuffing Tund as he began to scream about his rights and his love for Amara. The sound of his voice, usually so paralyzing, now just sounded pathetic and shrill. As they dragged him out, the adrenaline that had been keeping Amara upright suddenly evaporated. Her legs gave way. Yeeman caught her before she hit the tile. He led her to a bench just outside the restroom, ignoring the stares of the gathering crowd. He didn't leave. He sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance but remaining a steady presence while she sobbed into her hands. It's over, he said quietly. They'll take his statement, and then the police will take yours. He's not going anywhere tonight. Amara looked up, her mascara smudged, her face pale. Why did you help me? You didn't even know if I was the crazy one. I dragged you into a bathroom, for God's sake. Yeeman offered a faint, dry smile, the first real emotion she'd seen on his face. I'm a private security consultant, Amara. I spend my life reading people. You weren't a woman looking for trouble. You were a woman looking for a lifeline. I've seen that look too many times. He reached into his pocket and handed her a clean, linen handkerchief. Besides, my mother would have been very disappointed if I let a lady be bullied in a public restroom. Amara took the handkerchief, the scent of sandalwood and expensive soap clinging to it. I don't even know your name. Yeeman, he said. I'm Amara. I'm so sorry about your coat. She pointed to the wrinkled lapels where she had gripped him. He looked down at the fabric and shrugged. It's just wool, it can be pressed, your safety can't. The police arrival was a blur of flashing lights and repetitive questions. Yi Min stayed through it all. He stood by her side as she gave her statement, his presence acting as a silent warning to any officer who tried to dismiss her fears as a domestic dispute. He spoke to the lead detective in a low, authoritative voice, mentioning laws and statutes that Amara had never heard of. It became clear very quickly that Yi Min wasn't just a security guy, he was someone with significant influence. By the time they finished, the mall was closing. The bright, artificial cheer of the shopping center had faded into a dim, quiet emptiness. Let me walk you to your car, Yi Min said as they stepped out into the cool evening air. I took an Uber, Amara admitted. I was too nervous to drive today. I felt like he was watching me. He was, Yi Min said grimly. But he isn't anymore. I'll drive you home. My car is right here. He led her to a sleek, black SUV that looked like it belonged in a motorcade. As they pulled out of the parking lot, the silence in the car wasn't awkward. It was healing. Amara watched the city lights flicker past, feeling a strange sense of peace she hadn't known in years. You said you're a security consultant? She asked, breaking the silence. Does that mean you fight people for a living? Yi Min chuckled, a low, melodic sound. Mostly, I prevent the fight from happening. I assess risks, protect high-profile clients, and ensure that people who want to cause harm don't get the chance. Today was an informal consultation. I can't pay you, she said suddenly, her face flushing. I didn't ask for payment, Amara. Think of it as a karmic adjustment. He pulled the car up to her apartment complex. He didn't just drop her off. He walked her all the way to her door, scanning the hallways with that same sharp, calculating gaze. At her door, she turned to him, clutching his handkerchief in her hand. I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life, I'm sure of it. Yi Min reached into his wallet and pulled out a simple, matte black business card with nothing but his name and a phone number on it. If he gets out on bail, or if you even think you see him again, you call this number. It doesn't matter what time it is. Amara took the card, her fingers brushing his. The spark of connection was undeniable, a mix of shared trauma and an unexpected, deep-seated trust. Why are you doing all this? She asked softly. Yi Min looked at her, his expression softening. For a moment, the professional facade dropped, revealing a man who was genuinely moved by her resilience. Because nobody should have to run into a restroom to feel safe, Amara. And because I'd like to see what you look like when you're not terrified. He stepped back, giving her a small nod. Get some sleep, lock your doors, and remember, you're not alone anymore. Amara watched him walk down the hallway, his stride confident and calm. She went inside, locked the door, and for the first time in months she didn't check the closets. She looked at the black card in her hand. She had dragged a stranger into a restroom to hide from her past, but as she leaned her head against the door, she realized with a start that she might have just pulled her future in with her. The story of her life had always been about the man following her. Now, for the first time, it was about the man standing beside her. Days later, the weight of the encounter began to settle into a new kind of normal. Amara spent her mornings checking the news, her heart leaping every time a phone notification pinged. She hadn't called Yi Min yet, but the matte black card sat on her nightstand, a silent sentinel. She found herself replaying the scene in the restroom, not focusing on Tun's rage, but on the way Yi Min had stepped out of that stall. It was the first time someone had stepped into the line of fire for her, without hesitation. Her sister, Ketchai, called her on Tuesday evening. Amara, I heard about what happened at the mall. Why did you call me? Is he really in jail? He is, Amara replied, her voice steadier than she expected. The police said his visa was already flagged. He'd been staying in the country illegally to track me down. They're looking at deportation after the trial. And this man? Ketchai's voice turned teasing. The one who took him down, is he a ninja, a spy? Mom is already asking if he's single. Amara laughed, a genuine sound that felt foreign in her own throat. He's a security consultant, Ketchai, and he was just doing his job or his hobby, I guess. He was very professional. Professional men don't drive you home and give you their private number, Amara. They give you a case file and a bill. He likes you. Amara looked at the card. He's different, it's not like that. He just saw me, really saw me. That Friday, Amara finally summoned the courage. She didn't call, she sent a text. Hello, Yi Min. It's Amara. I wanted to thank you again for the handkerchief. It's washed and pressed. I'd like to return it to you. Maybe over coffee. My treat. The reply came 3 minutes later. Coffee sounds excellent. There's a quiet place near your apartment. Tomorrow at 10. When she arrived at the cafe, she saw him through the window. He wasn't wearing the charcoal coat today. Instead, he was in a simple navy sweater, reading a book. He looked less like a weapon and more like a person. When he saw her, he stood up, and for the first time, he gave her a full, warm smile. You look different, he said as she sat down. I slept 8 hours last night, she admitted. No nightmares. That's the best news I've heard all week. They talked for hours. She told him about her life in Lagos, her dream of becoming a fashion designer, and how Tun's love had turned into a cage. Yimin listened with an intensity that made her feel like the only person in the world. In return, he told her about his time in the military, the specialized training that had led him to high-stakes security, and the loneliness that often came with being a man people only called when they were in trouble. I'm glad I called you when I wasn't in trouble, she said, handing him the handkerchief. He took it but didn't put it away. He looked at it, then at her. I'm glad you called too, but Amara, there's something you should know. Tund wasn't working alone. The private investigators he hired, they were part of a larger network that specializes in recovery. I've spent the last few days looking into them. Amara's heart sank. Is it starting again? No, Yimin said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. It's ending. I've already contacted the authorities and shared my findings. That network is being dismantled as we speak. You're not just safe from him, you're safe from the people he used. The relief that washed over her was so physical she felt lightheaded. She realized then that Yimin hadn't just walked away after them all. He had stayed in the shadows, finishing the job he'd started in that restroom stall. Why? She whispered. Why go to all that trouble for me? Yimin looked at the window, then back at her. Because some people are worth the trouble. And because I think you have a lot of designs left to sketch, and you shouldn't have to do it with your back to the door. As they left the cafe, the sun was bright and the street was busy. Amara didn't look over her shoulder once. She walked beside him, their shoulders occasionally brushing. The world felt wide and full of possibilities again. So, she said, a playful glint in her eyes. Since you're such a high-profile consultant, what's your hourly rate for a coffee date? Yimin laughed, a deep, warm sound that made people on the street turn and smile. For you, it's a very specialized rate. One sketch of that silk scarf you were looking at in the mall window. I think it would look good on you. Deal, she said, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't running. She was exactly where she wanted to be. If you want to see how Amara and Yimin take down the rest of Tun's network, or if you want more stories of unexpected heroes, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Comment below with what you would have done in Amara's shoes. Would you have grabbed a stranger or kept running? Don't forget to like the video if you want a part 2 to this story. Your support keeps these stories coming. Would you like me to expand on the courtroom drama or their first official date in the next chapter?